have its elements replaced. But, you know, for example, the set of humans does not entail, right, also animals. It does not entail also trees. So when people talk about this, oh, nature, we're all connected, one should understand precisely what they mean. Because if one understands precisely what they mean is unimportant. Because either one, they're saying, oh, we're all connected in that there is this one, in which case, no, there, as a matter of fact, isn't. Because all of these sets are not necessarily ordinals of each other, right? So that we all are part and belong to this nature, right, that is one. Or what they're saying is there is a set that includes all of us, which is banal, because there is a complete indifference between sets, right? Okay, there's a set that includes all of us, but there is also a set that includes polluters and environmentalists. There is also a set that includes all Americans. There's a set that includes all carbon atoms, right? And so it has wide-ranging ontological effects about the very way in which we should think, and I mean that in the strongest sense possible, think through the problems of our world.
What's even worse is when people say shit like that, they're like, oh yeah, but it also doesn't include things like diseases, tectonic plates, these sorts of things, right? It's a very idealized set.
Yeah.
I would even radicalize it a little more too, right? By saying, when someone says we're all connected, what Badiou is showing us is that they're essentially harking back to an archaic theology.
Yes.
It is a reinstatement of God after the death of God. And hence a harking back to this old medieval idea of the great chain of being. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is a sort of proto-romantic medieval theology.
Yeah, and I mean, to give a little shout out to Zizek, right, there's a strong reason for why he says that, there's a strong reason to believe that environmentalism is the 21st opiate for the masses. Is not because, and one should understand this in the most rigorous way possible, it's not because it's stupid, or it's not just because it's stupid. It's because it's this attempt to call some justification, some connection, some one which justifies the cuts of sets and the void, right? So, with that dig against facile environmentalists.
Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's
yes,
take a break.
please.
You may start now.
Okay. Meditation 13, infinity is the other, small other, the rule, and the big other. Possibly to be understood in one convenient sense. So, what we've got is we've got the ancient Greeks. They had already formulated the finite existence, and basically God served as, in a certain sense, the infinite by not being limited. So this is an important break that Badiou shows, which I'll actually characterize a little bit here in a second. But he says that the true audacity of the moderns consisted in posing the infinity of nature, which requires a rethinking of God and the very nature of the universe. And so in this case, the infinity of nature threw the question of an infinite God into crisis, because nature became the infinite, and so there became no need for an infinite God as such. So let's go through the Greek conception of the finite and the place of God in that, which is that you can have an entire universe for the Greeks, which is finite, but the most important thing to remember is the finite doesn't mean necessarily even a quantitative finite, but that there's a limit to it, right? That there's a limit case. And in this case, the limit case is going to be God, right? The unmoved mover, the outside, or to put it, I mean, even going back to the pre-Socratics, the apeiron, right? The unlimited, or put in our terms, right, the infinite. But of course, that in their sense, the infinite needs to be understood with a proper stress. It is the infinite, the unfinite. It's filled with, it lacks finitude, right? Which is different from our conception of infinite, which, because of our modern conception, consists of, you know, oh, 0 to infinity, right? A sort of numerical, increasing, never-ending expansion.
Yeah, I think Spinoza's definitions of infinite and finite are, my understanding of it is, again, that something is, I think what he characterizes, something is infinite insofar as it is not limited by thought or extension or something else. Right? This is why substance is infinite, because there's no a substance outside of it which would limit it.
Right, but here's where Spinoza is a modern, and this is where it shows through, right? What people forget, especially from our modern read, is that Descartes is not engaging our modern conceptions of infinite, finite, reason, substance. He is confronting the, in very sense, Aristotelian, substantialist, medieval conceptions. So where that becomes a radical break is, we are also all part of God, right? For Aristotle, we are not all part of God, right? God is that thing that is itself unmoved. We are moving. We exist in place. We exist in finite. God does not. So even though he uses this difference of limit, right? What you'll notice is it explodes into infinite attributes, infinite modes, right? As a consequence of infinite substance, right? And as we saw in Badiou, this leads to problematic things. But I mean, this is the real point. For Spinoza, at least under Badiou's read, we have this infinite subaltern world of infinite modes, right? For Aristotle, to a certain extent, God is that subaltern infinite, substance that then poses the limit on the Greek finite existence. So does that make sense? So in this case, God falls into crisis. There needs to be newer and newer conceptions of God. And what we find is they become less and less suitable because the infinite is already taken up by nature. So the infinite must be dealt with in mathematics because any other domain reverts to vague intuitions of largeness. And this also breaks from Greek finibus perspectives, right? It's not a poem that's infinite, it's not politics that's infinite, it's not moral that's infinite, it's not virtue, it's infinite, it's not even the good, right? The form of the good, or the philosophical conception of the good, or what have you, right? All of these are vague, right? And they just depend on some, again, conception of largeness. The only infinite that is consistent and coherent and rigorous is an infinite of mathematics. So just touching back on what we've touched on a million times before, it's the notion of the chiliagon. Imagine a triangle, then imagine a square, and then a pentagon and a hexagon, up to 1,000 sides, and then another 1,000 sides, right? And the problem is this imaginary attempt at infinite is just that. It's just a vague notion of largeness. And so we have to rigorously examine it in mathematics. Now, one of the things that mathematics has done, which we will soon see, is the infinite is no longer linked to the one, but rather there is the conceptual possibility of multiple infinites, right? Because as we'll see later, an infinite is, so to say something is infinite is to have a set of conditions for it. And these conditions are not an endless counting. There is not one endless count as one. Ergo, there is no one. So we get into a new sort of infinity. So let's go through the conditions that Badiou lays down for the infinite existing. And this is, I believe, 145 to 140, or 145 to 148. The infinite exists on the grounds of several conditions. A is that there is already a point of being that is presented.
146.
Yeah.
That is presented as the existence of a multiple. So, simply put, this is a start point. Then B, we have a procedure, a rule, which is such that it indicates how I quote-unquote pass from one presented multiple to another, and its failure, which reveals the infinite. So basically, this is a rule of count. Now, one of the stipulations is this rule of count has to fail. And it has to be a very particular sort of failure, which is I cannot reach the end of it. So if I count, I have an initial point of 0, and I have a count to 10. Well, actually, I mean, even this would be difficult. We'll just go with it. It's wrong, but roll with it. If I have a count to 10, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I've finished the count, right? And so it's a count from 1 to 10. It's reached an end. Now, the reason why this doesn't work is because it doesn't actually have a procedure as such, right? What a procedure as such would be A, add 1. So what you'll notice is if I have an add one procedure, suddenly I actually do have a problem. I do have a failure account. Because I have a 1 add 1, 2, 2 add 1, 3, 3 add 1, 4, 4 add 1, 5, and so on, which can never be completed, right? At no point can I finish the count. So the very failure of this count, this very failure of this process, this rule of proceeding, is what itself indicates, does not prove, but indicates us the possibly infinite nature of this procedure.
So just to clarify